The following is an exposition of Job 27, 9 and 10 by Joseph Caryl. Will God hear his cry when trouble cometh upon him? Will he delight himself in the Almighty? Will he always call upon God? In these two verses, Job prosecutes and proves what he had asserted in the former verse, that the hypocrite has no hope. What is the hope of the hypocrite when God takes away his soul? He that has hope shall be answered when he prays. God will hear his cry. He that has hope delights in God when he sees nothing but causes of sorrow in the world. Hope encourages the soul to seek unto God without ceasing in the lowest ebb and darkest night of outward trouble. But all these run cross to the hypocrite. He shall cry and not be heard. He has no delight in God, nor can he hold out long in calling upon God. Therefore he has no hope. Job's proof arises two ways. He argues first from what God would not do. God will not hear his cry when trouble cometh upon him. Therefore he has no hope. That is his first argument. Secondly, he argues from what the hypocrite would not do, and that in two particulars. First, he does not delight in God. Will he delight himself in the Almighty? The sense of the question is negative. He will not, and therefore he has no hope. Secondly, he argues from his not persevering in prayer to God. Will he always call upon God? He will not, and therefore he has no hope. Verse 9, will God hear his cry? No, he will not. The Lord hears the least whisper of a gracious soul. The language of his heart, his thoughts, have a sound in the ears of God. But the cry, the loudest cry of an hypocrite, God will not hear. That is, he will not show him favor by granting him that which he cried for. God hears what is said in prayer. Whosoever prayeth, but there are many prayers made which he does not grant. It is no good to us to be heard unless we be thus heard. In scripture language, not to be helped is not to be heard. By a cry we are to understand more than ordinary prayer. Crying is vehement praying. Crying notes earnestness or fervency in prayer. This poor man cried, saith the prophet, Psalm 34:6. That is, he prayed mightily, and the Lord heard him and saved him out of all of his troubles. And the Lord said unto Moses, wherefore criest thou unto me? That is, why do you call so earnestly upon me? Moses cried, though he spake nothing. It was the intention of his spirit, not the loudness of his voice. It was the clamor of his heart, not of his mouth, that made the cry. As in Scripture, the multiplying of prayer notes the intention of the Spirit in it, Isaiah 1:15. When you spread forth your hands, I will hide mine eyes from you. When you make many prayers, I will not hear. Your hands are full of blood. So crying out in any one prayer shows utmost intention of the Spirit in it. Will God hear his cry? That is, will he hear when he is most urgent and importunate in prayer, when his spirit is, as it were, all on fire and inflamed in prayer? No, he will not. God will not only not hear his slothful prayers and his sleepy prayers, his cold-hearted and dead-hearted prayers, but when he seems to be most warm and lively in prayer, when he seems to be most hearty and pressing in prayer, God will not hear him. This aggravates the misery of the hypocrite exceedingly, and yet that which follows aggravates it much more. Will God hear his cry when trouble comes upon him? An hypocrite would not much care if he were not heard in times of peace, and in the affluence of outward enjoyments, but this pinches him to our purpose, that God will not hear his cry when trouble cometh upon him. Such trouble as is a strait, and puts him between two walls, yea, that puts him as it were in the stocks or in prison, that puts him in little ease. Such a kind of trouble, a straitening trouble is here meant, yea, and a vexing trouble. Many troubles may come upon us, and yet not put us into straits. We may be in trouble and yet see our way out of trouble. But that man is in a sad condition who, being in trouble, knows not which way to turn for help in the world. And while he turns himself to God, God will not hear him. when trouble comes. The action or motion of a living creature is here ascribed to trouble. Trouble comes. It is usual in Scripture to speak so, and it is an allusion to an adversary or an enemy, whether a single person or an army. Thus it is expressed by Solomon, Proverbs 6:11. So shall thy poverty come as one that travels, and thy want as an armed man. The slothful man, or sluggard, for of him that text speaks, sits still, but poverty is upon its speed, and travels hard to overtake him. And as his poverty is said to come like a traveler, because it comes speedily, so it is said to come like an armed man, because it comes violently, and as to him irresistibly. Thus trouble comes upon the hypocrite. It comes like an armed man. Yea, it comes like a whole army of men, and it camps round about him and besieges him on every side. As Christ speaks of Jerusalem, Luke 19:43, the day shall come upon thee that thine enemies shall cast a trench about thee, and compass thee round, and keep thee in on every side. They shall put thee, as it were, into a pound. That's the emphasis of the word here. Trouble shall come like an army of enemies upon the hypocrite, and then he will cry aloud to the Lord for help, but the Lord will not hear his cry. His trouble shall prevail upon him and be remediless, because his prayer does not prevail with God, but it is returned or sent back answerless. So observe first. Trouble shall come upon him and overcome the hypocrite. Many are the troubles of the righteous or upright, and the hypocrite does not escape without his troubles. He meets them many times in his way, and he meets them always at his end. A godly man may often meet with trouble in his way, but he never meets it at his end. Psalm 37 and 38. Mark the perfect man, and behold the upright, for the end of that man is peace. But transgressors shall be destroyed together. The end of the wicked shall be cut off. That is, either the thing which he proposed to himself as his design or end shall be cut off, or himself shall be cut off in the end. An hypocrite must needs meet with trouble because he is so sinful, and when he meets with trouble, that must needs destroy him because he lies open or naked to it, and has no shelter against it. He is not under the protection of God. He doesn't have anyone promised in the whole book of God to friend when enemies and troubles come. He is not fenced and fortified as the upright are. God is a wall, even a wall of fire about his people. He is their defense and bulwark, their strong tower and deliverer. They have many fortifications against troubles. Though they are much assaulted, yet they are well defended. God himself is their fortification, their stronghold. They are not a naked people, but an hypocrite is exposed naked to the shock and shot of every trouble. Sin does not only bereave us of our innocency, but of our safety. It does not only clothe us with impurity, but unclothe us of power. When Aaron had made the golden calf, Moses, coming down from the mount, both rebukes and questions him about it. And he saw that the people were naked, for Aaron had made them naked to their shame amongst their enemies. Exodus 32:25. How had Aaron made them naked? Not by taking their clothes off from their bodies, for he took nothing of them towards the making of the golden calf, but their golden earrings, verses 2 and 3, which they might well enough spare, and not be corporally naked. But Moses saw them stripped of the protection and favorable presence of God, which was not only as a garment to defend them from cold and shame, but as an armor of proof, or as a strong tower to defend them from danger. A godly man sinning renders himself sometimes thus naked, but a wicked man is always thus naked. He is not a rag of a promise to put about him, and is therefore obnoxious to the incursions of every evil. His sin hastens the coming of trouble, and his sin leaves him unguarded when trouble comes. He that dwells in the secret place of the Most High shall abide under the shadow of the Almighty. And it shows that a man resting in God is secure, be his dangers never so great, and his case never so desperate. The psalmist gives assurance to such an one, verses 4 and 5. He shall cover thee with his feathers, as which is Moses' allusion, Deuteronomy 32:11. The eagle flutters over her young. or Christ's illusion, the hen gathers her chickens under her wings. So under his wings shalt thou trust. His truth shall be thy shield and buckler. Thou shalt not be afraid for the terror by night, nor for the arrow that flies by day. But the hypocrite's breast stands open like a butt to all the terrors and arrows of the Almighty. Now the troubles that come upon the hypocrite are of two sorts. First, they are troubles from without. Secondly, troubles from within, troubles of body and troubles of mind. His conscience, which knows what he has done, and has accused him for what he has done, is ready to vex and trouble him for what he has done. Conscience, having judged and condemned him, wounds and torments him, and he has nothing either to keep off the stroke of it, or to heal it. Thus all sorts of trouble invade and assault him, while he has no real remedy, or relief against any of them. For God will not hear his cry when trouble comes upon him. An exposition of Job, chapter 27, verse 10, Joseph Caryl. Will he, that is, the hypocrite, delight himself in the Almighty? Will he always call upon God? He will cry unto God, but will he delight himself in God? He will cry unto God sometimes, but will he always call upon God? He may be violent in duty, but he is not constant. Thus the hypocrite fails and falls short. Will he delight himself in the Almighty? The word here translated to delight is also what it is to delight ourselves in any person or thing. Was opened at the 26th verse of the 22nd chapter of this book. And therefore I pass it here. Mr. Broughton reads the text thus, and so do some others. Not will he, but can he delight himself in the Almighty? As if the sense were, it is a thing impossible that he should. To delight in God is one of the highest exercises of grace, and how can he do that who has no grace at all? The hypocrite cannot find comfort in God when the world affords him none, as a godly man can. We well render it, will he delight himself in the Almighty, as if he had said, as the Almighty will not grant his request, nor give him his delight, that is, the thing which he desires, so he has no will, no mind at all to delight in the Almighty. The proper manner of delight is to have what we desire and to enjoy what we have. The hypocrite has no pure desire to have or enjoy God, but his desire is to have and enjoy somewhat from God, and when once he perceives that he cannot obtain that from God which he delights in, he has no delight at all in God. Desire is love in motion, and delight is love at rest. The hypocrite's will does not rest in God, but runs out many ways after creatures. After them he will go, and therefore he has no will to delight in God, which is to rest in God. When God denies him the creature, that which he so much desired to rest in, as will appear further in the observations. Only before I come at them, we may take notice of the title by which God is here expressed as not delighted in by the hypocrite. Will he delight himself in the Almighty, or upon the Almighty? This name of God Shaddai imports both his power and his goodness. God is a full storehouse, or a most plentiful spring of all good to his people, ready to convey and give but himself for the supply of all their needs. He is and has everything which may draw out desire and render him, as was said of Titus Vespasian, but is infinitely more true of God, the delights of mankind. Yet there are but few among the sons of men whose desires and delights meet and center in God. And such is the falseness of the hypocrite's heart, that though he seems to make much love to God, yet this negative interrogation is true of him, will he delight himself in the Almighty? Hence observe first, they who are godly indeed delight in God, yea, they delight in nothing but God, or that which carries the appearance or bears the image and impression of God upon it. Thus they delight in the Word of God, and the works of God, whether of creation or providence, in the ways and ordinances of God, and the servants and people of God, in whom David, as a type of Christ, said, Psalm 16:2, is all my delight. And all because in these persons and in these things, the invisible things of God, his power and wisdom, his holiness and goodness are seen, and as it were, made visible. While Moses calls the people of Israel to delight in the good things of God, he teaches them to terminate all their delight in the Lord himself. Deuteronomy 12, the 7th and 18th verses compared. And there shall ye eat before the Lord your God, and you shall receive in all that you put your hands unto, ye and your households, wherein the Lord thy God has blessed thee. But thou must eat them before the Lord thy God in a place which the Lord thy God shall choose, thou and thy son, and thy daughter, and thy manservant, and thy maidservant, and the Levite that is within thy gates. And thou shalt rejoice before the Lord thy God in all that thou puttest thy hand unto. As if he had said, when you shall rejoice in all that you put your hands to, be sure that your rejoicing be before the Lord, that is, in a sense of the presence of the Lord with thee, who has blessed thee and caused thee to prosper in all that you have put your hand to. So Paul enjoins the Philippians 3:1. Finally, my brethren, rejoice in the Lord. And in chapter 4:4, rejoice in the Lord always, and again I say rejoice. This joy or delight in the Lord belongs to the first commandment, and therefore it is called natural worship. Not natural as opposed to spiritual, but as natural as opposed to formal or instituted worship, because this delight is a worship which we were to give to God, considered in himself, though he had not given any direction about it, as he has done about his external worship. We don't know in what particular form God will be worshipped till he declares his own will about it. And though we ought always to be willing to worship God, yet we must not give him a will worship. But if we know no more of God than that he is, we may know that we ought to worship him by delighting in him, for that is a natural sequel from the knowledge of him. And so to fear God, to trust upon him, to believe in him are acts of worship which the very discoveries of God call us to, though God had never published a law requiring any such worship. But how little of this pure spiritual worship has God in the world! How few are there that delight in God! Some cannot take any delight at all. If there be but a mention of God, to discourse of God puts them into a fit of melancholy. They must put God out of the company before they can be merry or rejoice. They like not to retain God in their knowledge, as the Apostle speaks of the old Gentiles, Romans 1:8-28. And therefore the knowledge of God cannot at all be delightful to them. Yea, how little of this internal and most spiritual worship has God from his own people. How little are they in thinking and speaking of him with delight. How seldom are they longing to enjoy him. How seldom rejoicing in the enjoyment of him. Though every one who is truly godly does truly delight in God, yet is to be charged upon most godly men that they are not filled with those delights. It is rare to find David's spirit who could say, Psalm 63:1, O God, thou art my God, early will I seek thee. My soul thirsteth for thee. My flesh longeth for thee, to see thy power and thy glory. So I have seen in the sanctuary. They who have seen and tasted how gracious the Lord is will be calling for more such sights and tastes, and the more they have had of those sights and tastes, the more they will desire them. What David has seen of God in the sanctuary, he could not but desire to see again. And how does he promise himself an all delightful satisfaction in God? Could he but feed upon him in his thoughts, Psalm 4 and 5 of the same psalm. My soul shall be satisfied with marrow and fatness, and my mouth shall praise thee with joyful lips, when I remember thee upon my bed, and meditate on thee in the night watches. As it is the property of a godly man to delight in God, so he does promise, yea, assure himself of more delights in God, could he but get and keep his heart more to the meditation of God. Secondly, observe, a hypocrite does not, will not, cannot truly delight in God. He does not because he is carnal and filled with the wisdom of the flesh, and so with desires after and delights in fleshly things. And until this fleshly mind with which he is vainly puffed up, and which in the very wisdom of it is enmity against God, he neither will nor can delight in God. The Lord says of the hypocritical Jews, Isaiah 58:2, they seek me daily and delight to know my ways, as a nation that did righteousness, and so on. A hypocrite may imitate those who delight in God and his ways, but he has no real delight in either. The delight which he has in worldly things is seldom, if at all, hearty. For, as Solomon speaks, Proverbs 14:13, in laughter his heart is sorrowful, and the end of such mirth is heaviness. And there is a worm at the root of his pleasant gourd, which kills it, and causes it to wither. So there is a worm, a gnawing worm, at his heart oftentimes, which makes his pleasures wither, while his gourd is green and flourishing. And surely if the hypocrite's delight in the best of his temporal enjoyments be scarcely hearty, how heartless is his delight in spiritual things? Till the affections are made spiritual, there is no affection to things that are spiritual. So then at best, a hypocrite who takes but a poor delight in anything takes only a hypocritical delight in the best things of God, and in God who is best of all. For first, he has no hope in God, therefore no delight in God. He that is without hope is without God, and how can he have delight in God who is without God? The hypocrite is without any true hope at any time, and many times he is without so much as a show or a shadow of hope. His hope, like his goodness, is as a morning cloud, and as an early dew it goes away. And if the hope deferred makes the heart sick, surely when hope in God is quite departed and gone, the heart cannot delight in God. There is no condition that does so much estrange the heart from God as a hopeless condition. Jeremiah 18:12, and they said, there is no hope. What will they do then? Even run as far from God as they can, so it follows in the same place. But we will walk after our own devices, and we will everyone do the imagination of his evil heart. Secondly, the hypocrite has no suitableness in his heart to God, therefore no delight in God. There must be some likeness between the faculty and the object, else there can be no delight in any kind whatsoever. Now what likeness is there between light and darkness, between good and evil, between a holy God and an unholy heart, between the true, the faithful God, and a false-hearted hypocrite? Thirdly, the hypocrite's delight is so carried out to other things. The streams of it are divided into so many channels that he has none to spare for God. His delight runs to riches, to gold and silver. His delight runs to pleasure, to the fat and sweet of the creature. His delight runs to honor, to dignities and preferments among men. He delights in friends, yea, he delights in sin and wickedness. Only steal away his delight from God, and puts his mouth out of taste as to tasting that the Lord is gracious, or how gracious the Lord is. As Christ expostulates a matter sharply and chidingly with the hypocritical Jews, John 5:44, how can you believe which receive honor one of another, and seek not the honor that comes from God only? So we may expostulate with the whole kind of hypocrites. How can ye delight in the Almighty, who take up your delights in the creature, and seek not, nor are satisfied with those delights that are in and come from God only? If we delight not in God only, we delight not in God at all. As we cannot serve, so we cannot delight in God in mammon. For if we love the one, we will hate the other, and if we delight in the one, we shall despise the other. As God despises those who delight in the creature, so they who delight in the creature will despise God. And if such say they do not, yet God knows they do despise him, and interprets all such pleasure taken in the creature a contempt of himself. And hence Christ announces, woe unto them that laugh now, Luke 6:25. That is, who laugh and rejoice in worldly enjoyment, because such joy and laughter is inconsistent with joy in God. The creature may be the medium or means of our delight, but God only must be the object of it, or our delight may pass through the creature, but it must determine in God alone. Again, compare the verse, will God hear his cry when trouble comes upon him, with this, will he always delight himself in the Almighty? And observe, unless the hypocrite get what he asks of God, he takes no delight in God. The psalmist calls all the prayers of a hypocritical person flattery. Psalm 78:36. When he slew them, then they sought him, and they returned and inquired early after God, and they remembered that God was a rock, and high God their Redeemer. That is, they told God in prayer that he was their rock. Nevertheless, they did flatter him with their mouth, and they lied unto him with their tongue, for their heart was not right with him. That is, they had no true love to nor delight in God, only they would fain have got help from him, and deliverance from their troubles. A flatterer does not delight in the person flattered, but in that which he hopes to attain of him by flattery. And as their hypocrisy did break out in their departure, and backslidings from God, as soon as they were eased of their fears, so the hypocrisy of others breaks out in their departure from God when they cannot get their desires. The heart of a sincere man is of another frame and temper. For though God delay, yet deny him an answer, in that he prays for, yet he delights in him. He cries to the Lord in sickness and poverty and straits, and the Lord sometimes let him lie sick and poor and straitened, and gives him no relief. Yet he delights and comforts himself in God. Yea, God is better to him than that he asks at the hand of God, and therefore he takes pleasure in communion with God, though God be not pleased to mend his condition. We may well suppose that the prophet Habakkuk prayed hard for the keeping off that judgment of famine, yet in case famine should devour all, and so his prayer not be granted, yet his heart towards God was the same, and his assurance strong, that his enjoyment of God alone would be as sweet to him as in the greatest plenty of creature enjoyments. Habakkuk 3:17. Although the fig tree shall not blossom, neither shall fruit be in the vine, the labor of the olive shall fail, and the field shall yield no meat, the stock shall be cut off from the fold, and there shall be no herd in the stalls. Yet will I rejoice in the Lord, I will joy in the God of my salvation. A sincere heart can feast in God while he is starving in the creature. God is as good to him without the world as with it. And whatsoever good he asks of God, God is better to him than what he asks, except when he asks God himself. None pray purely to God, but they who can rest satisfied with God, though God does not satisfy their desires in granting what they pray for. Lastly, we may take these words, will he delight himself in the Almighty, as a reason why the hypocrite cry is not heard. God does not hear his prayers, because he has no delight in God. He would have the mercies of God, but he doesn't care for the God of his mercies, and so he has neither. So observe, he that does not delight in God is not heard of God. The Lord can easily distinguish between a flatterer and a humble petitioner. He knows who comes to him for his, or because they know not what to do without him, or who come to him for himself, and because they love to be with him. Psalm 37, verse 4. Delight thyself in the Lord, and he shall give thee the desires of thine heart. As if David had said, would you have the desires of your heart given in and your prayer granted? When you ask of God, delight yourselves in God, and you will have your desires. This the psalmist affirms, not only because God in whom the soul delights is more than all that we can desire beside, because those who truly delight in God are in the readiest way to receive all that they desire besides. Every man delights in the things he heartily asks for. How glad would they be of riches who being poor ask for riches? How glad would they be of health who being sick pray for health? But every godly man delights more in God of whom he asks, and of that which he asks of God, and therefore as God gives himself, so that which he desires too. It is the delight of God to hear those that delight in him. And though God's delighting in us is indeed the cause of his granting our desires, yet it is our duty as well as our interest to delight in God, that we may have our desires granted. When God sees that we rejoice more in this, that he is our God, than in all things else that can be given us, and he is ready to give us all things else. The Lord was so well pleased with Solomon's asking, when he asked a wise and an understanding heart to govern that great people, that the Lord gave him not only what he asked, but what he asked not, riches and honor. Surely then the Lord is so well pleased with those who ask and earnestly desire the enjoyment of himself, that he cannot withhold from them any lawful enjoyment which is good for them and desired by them. Now, as a hypocrite not delighting in God is not heard when he calls, so because he delights not in God, he will not be long heard calling, as is showed in the close of this verse. Will he always call upon God? The hypocrite prays, but he does not hold out or persevere in prayer. The original words which we translate always are in all time, that is, in all the due time and seasons of prayer. As if Job had said, will the hypocrite call upon God as often as the providences of God and his own duty call him to pray? They pray always who pray when they ought, or as often and as long as they ought. Thus the hypocrite will not always call upon God. He will not take his time and seasons to begin, nor will he continue in it as he ought when he has begun. We may be said to do that always, which we do as often as we are called, and which we are always ready and willing to do, though not called. So note, unless we are in a frame to pray always, God will not hear us at all. That is, unless we would always be in such a frame. The holiest man living may have his heart out of order, but he loves to have it always in order and ready for every good word and work. He would always be in a praying frame, and he actually prays in time of prosperity as well as in time of adversity, in time of peace as well as in time of trouble, when all is well with him as well as when he is at the worst. Unless our spirit be for prayer at all times, we make God our refuge only, not our choice, and are as they who would make use of a friend, but care not at all to enjoy him. And God will hear such when he sees he should never hear of them unless compelled to ask by necessity. It is true that God hears his people in many cases before they cry. He prevents prayer. Yet it is true God hears not any unless they pray always, unless they pray continually. And he that did ever pray, I do not say that he ever said a prayer or made a prayer, but he that did ever pray indeed and has cried, Abba, Father, though but once, through the spirit of adoption, that man cannot but, in a sense explained, be always praying. Secondly, from the words considered in themselves note, it is our duty to call upon God always. The text implies this clearly. Other texts speak it plainly. The Lord gives a parable, Luke 18, and this is the scope of it, verse 1. He spake a parable unto them to this end, that men ought always to pray and not to faint. First, we cannot subsist a minute without the assistance of God, for in him we live and move and have our being, Acts 17:28. And as we have our life, motion, and being, so the comforts of our life, the guidance of our motions, and our well-being from him. Therefore we must always pray both to acknowledge our dependence and receive assistance from him. Secondly, we are continually besieged with evils and temptations. We have enemies about us, either visible or invisible, seen or unseen. Therefore we have need to pray continually. If we had enemies always in sight, we would pray always. We have unseen enemies always about us, and these are the most dangerous enemies. Therefore we have more need always to pray and call in the aid of God against them. A hypocrite will not always call upon God. You may see him set out very full of mettle. He sets out about good duties, as some horses that will stand no ground in the morning when they go out, but they tire after an hour's riding. They will not travel all the day. So a hypocrite may set out with a great deal of mettle, but will he always pray? No, he will be weary of duty and throw it up at last. And he throws it up upon these, and upon either of these two occasions, both which we may take notice of from the text. First, when he speeds not in prayer, then he will throw up prayer when he sees nothing coming. He cannot go on. Will he continue when there is no answer, no appearance of an answer, or when God seems in his providence to speak contrary to his prayer? Will he now persevere in calling upon God? No, he has no desire to duty, when he cannot get what he desires by duty. It is with him as with some draft horses. They will draw when the load is coming, but if they feel it not coming, they trample and will not draw. But take a horse of a right breed, and put his traces to a tree or a post. He will strain, and die upon the place, though nothing come, before he will give it over. Thus it is in this case, a godly man, though he feel not the petition come for which he asks, whether in spiritual or temporal, it may be he has prayed many a year for such and such a mercy, and cannot get it, yet he will pray still, He knows it is his duty to wait as well as to pray. And though the Lord let him wait long, yet he will pray still, without limiting the Holy One of Israel. It shows a very gracious heart to be encouraged by the experience we have of the Lord's answering prayer to pray still. But it is an argument of a more gracious spirit not to be discouraged from continuing in prayer when we can get no answer. The spirit of holy courage never lodged in the heart of a hypocrite. If God will not do what he prays, he has done praying. Secondly, take the contrary. If the hypocrite speed in prayer and get what he asks, then also he throws up prayer and will ask no more. If from a sick bed he be raised to health, he leaves prayer behind him, as it were. He grows weak in calling upon God. When at his call, God has given him strength. And thus it is in any other instance, when he has got what he has a mind to in prayer, he has no more mind to pray. Whereas a godly man prays after he has sped, as he did before, as though he fall not into those troubles again, and so is not occasion to urge those petitions again, which he did in troubles. Yet he cannot live without prayer, because he cannot live out of communion with God. The creature is as the white of an egg, tasteless to him, unless he enjoy God, David saith, Psalm 116, 1 and 2. I love the Lord, because he has heard my voice and my supplication. That is, because he has granted me that which I supplicated to him for. But did this grant of what he had asked take him off from asking more? The next words show us what his resolution was upon that grant. Because he has inclined his ear unto me, and therefore I will call upon him as long as I live. As if he said, I will never give over praying, for as much as I have been heard in prayer. It is reported of one who always laid a net upon his table when he went to meat, to mind him of his duty, to fish for souls in his pastoral care and office, as was pretended of him, I say it is reported, that when he attained to high preferment, he laid aside the use of his net at table, and being asked why, answered that he had now got that which he had been fishing for. He had caught his fish, and therefore cared no more for his net. Thus a hypocrite puts away his net of prayer when once he has taken the fish, the benefit which he desired and labored for. In both these cases we may put Job's question, will a hypocrite pray always? If he can get nothing, he saith, why should I wait upon God any longer? What profit is it to pray to him? And if once he get his profit, he says, what need I pray any longer? I have what I would have. And then he either grows remiss and slack in duty, or lays it quietly aside. He never sought God for God himself, but himself in seeking God. And so having found what he desired for himself in seeking God, he has no desire, or but a very cold one, to seek God any more. Therefore, lastly, comparing the two parts of the text, will he delight himself in the Almighty? Will he always call upon God? I say, comparing these together, we may, for conclusion of this verse, observe, they that delight in God, and they only, will always call upon God, or persevere to the end in prayer. The reason is because God is the same always, without any variableness or shadow of turning. A sincere believer sees he has as much need of God when he has supplied all his present needs as he had before. And he knows God is as good, as gracious, as desirable as ever he was, though he delay or deny the grant of that which he has desired, so that whatsoever God dispenses or gives out to him, whether good or evil, bitter or sweet, dark or light, grief or sorrow, he still keeps close to God and will always be making his addresses and applications at the throne of grace. God is sweeter to him than all the mercies and blessings, than all the graces and comforts which he has given him. And God is exceeding sweet to him, though he does not presently give him the mercies and the blessings, the exercise of those graces, and the filling of those comforts which he has prayed for. To close, we have three things remarkable in these two verses concerning the hypocrite. First, the hypocrite delights not in God. There's his sin. Secondly, God hears not the cry of the hypocrite. That's his misery. Thirdly, the hypocrite will not always call upon God. That's both his sin and his misery. It is a great sin not to call upon God, and none are more miserable than they who do not call upon him, for their misery is irremovable. From all Job infers that he was no hypocrite, For though God did not presently hear him so as to deliver him, yet he delighted in the Almighty, and would continue praying to him and trusting upon him, though he should slay him. An exposition of Job 27:9 and 10 by Joseph Caryl.
Still Waters Revival Books is now located at PuritanDownloads.com. It's your worldwide online Reformation home for the very best in free and discounted classic and contemporary, Puritan and Reformed books, MP3s, and videos. For much more information on the Puritans and Reformers, including the best free and discounted classic and contemporary books, MP3s, digital downloads, and videos, please visit Still Waters Revival Books at PuritanDownloads.com. Still Waters Revival Books also publishes the Puritan Hard Drive, the most powerful and practical Christian study tool ever produced. All thanks and glory be to the mercy, grace, and love of the Lord Jesus Christ for this remarkable and wonderful new Christian study tool. The Puritan Hard Drive contains over 12,500 of the best Reformation books, MP3s, and videos ever gathered onto one portable Christian study tool. An extraordinary collection of Puritan, Protestant, Calvinistic, Presbyterian, Covenanter, and Reformed Baptist resources. It's fully upgradable and it's small enough to fit in your pocket. The Puritan Hard Drive combines an embedded database containing many millions of records with the most amazing and extraordinary custom Christian search and research software ever created. The Puritan Hard Drive has been produced to assist you in the fascinating and exhilarating spiritual, intellectual, familial, ecclesiastical, and societal adventure that is living the Christian life. It has been specifically designed so that you might more faithfully know, serve, and love the Lord Jesus Christ, as well as to help you to do all you can to bring glory to His great name. If you want to love God with all your heart, soul, strength, and mind, then the Puritan Hard Drive is for you. Visit PuritanDownloads.com today for much more information on the Puritan Hard Drive and to take advantage of all the free and discounted Reformation and Puritan books, MP3s, and videos that we offer at Still Waters Revival Books.